We're delighted to be here today to share some of our experiences with you all, and as we run through it, hopefully there's lessons in there for you to take away. I suppose the GAA were set up in such a way that we have clubs from the super small to the super large, and I suppose we like to think of ourselves as somewhere in the middle, and we're going about our business over the last couple of years in a particular way. And as I say, some things you may see here you're all doing anyway, and it's fairly standard. Other things you might see as something new and something you could try. So as I say, hopefully you pick something up from it. What we'll do is I just want to run through a bit of background on the club itself, where we found ourselves in the last couple of years, and sort of a changing social developments in our town and changes in population in our town and where that left us, how we dealt with that and how we moved forward, and maybe some of the challenges and benefits of what we've been doing. My colleague here, the chairperson of our Board and Og subcommittee, Willie Ford, who's also an integral part of our under-10 football coaching team, is going to present his particular experiences in relation to the implementation of Go games at under-10 level. So that'd be quite interesting as well. So just by way of introduction, for those of you that don't know, Eatonderry is located in the northeast corner of County Offaly, in I suppose what's known as predominantly the football end of the county, where you're quite close to our neighbours in Westmeath and Meath, and I suppose closer still to our neighbours in Kildare, which can be difficult at times, but I suppose we all have troublesome neighbours. But it's even more so in my case. My father's from Kildare, so it's particularly sensitive for myself. But although it's predominantly a football area, we do accommodate hurling, we do promote hurling as well, and we've ladies football. At present, we're fielding 33 teams on what's, I suppose, very limited facilities. We have one main pitch, we have a clubhouse and dressing rooms and a large training area, and we have the use of a number of schools' pitches, but we're under a lot of pressure in terms of our facilities. At present, we've 872 registered members, which has increased dramatically in recent years, which I'll run through shortly. About 600 of those are youth members, and I suppose the feed from that is our local primary schools, 5 of them, 3 of which are quite recent additions to our community. There was traditionally 2 schools which we would have always had a very strong relationship with, and we've had the opportunity, because the other 3 schools are quite new, to be able to build the relationship with them from day one, and that's been very beneficial. And we've 2 secondary schools within our catchment area as well, which have been doing great work over the years. Oakland's Community College, which was formerly the vocational school, was quite successful in the 80s, winning All-Ireland vocational titles, and more recently, you may be aware, St Mary's Eatonderry won the Hogan Cup in 2012 after coming up from the B Championship in 2007. They were beaten in the final of the Hogan Cup as well in 2009. And I suppose because of our location on the border, those schools, the second level schools, would benefit from players coming in from Westmeath and Meath and Kildare, and there's quite a lot of competition for places. But we know our players have been exposed to quite a high level of football in the school, and it's a great barometer for us to see how our players are actually getting on with the schools, because they're operating in such a healthy environment. Just maybe to run through some of the high-profile members that are associated with our club. Over the years, we've always supplied some good players to Offaly teams, and particularly successful teams in both hurling and football. In hurling, with Sean O'Farrell was involved with Offaly, the All-Ireland winning team in 1994, and Killian Farrell was involved in the squad in 1998, and in fact Killian is the current Meath hurling manager. In football terms, the older gentlemen at the top of the photograph, Mick Brady, Tommy Cullen and Sean Foran, would have been involved in the Offaly teams in the 1960s, as Offaly began to make the breakthrough in football terms. The next picture, so we're not trying to claim Nicky Brennan as one of ours. That's Jerry Carroll, who's involved in the Offaly team in 1982, and Jerry spent a lot of his life in New York since, but he still has a connection back to the club. Our school liaison officer, Keith, is his nephew, and he's actually here with us today, and Keith does a tremendous amount of work in our local primary schools. And then more recently, we've had players like Finbar Cullen, who's represented Ireland, and Peter Brady. And those gentlemen, along with another Offaly player, Kevin Ging, have been involved in our own senior setup recently and been quite successful. And also Paul O'Kelly, who's involved in selecting Offaly teams and also managed an Offaly team for a particular time. So I suppose as a club over the years our fortunes would have fluctuated, I suppose, no more nor less than many clubs. We particularly had a very strong period in the 1990s, both at underage level and at adult level. And I suppose which I suppose a lot of clubs do, we measure our success in titles. We would have seen the 1990s as a very successful period in the club. We came to the end of the decade, we had entering into the early 2000s, we had just won 4 senior titles in a short space of time and an abundance of underage titles. And I suppose if we were to do take stock of where we were at that time, we would have said to ourselves, well, the future is certainly very bright. As I said, if we're measuring our success on titles won and looking forward, things were going to be very rosy. But for, I suppose, a number of reasons that we've tried to analyse, things began to slide very quickly as we entered the early 2000s. And by the middle of the decade, in 2006, what we call, I suppose, we hit rock bottom. Our senior team was relegated for the first time in our history. And also in that period, we would have seen a hemorrhaging of a lot of our players, more so than in any other period. Our underage teams were struggling quite badly. We lost a lot of people at committee level. And I suppose effectively the club was in a stagnant sort of position. And whilst all around us, economically, everywhere was improving, all other clubs, and I suppose even here in Croke Park, it was just newly built, and there was a great vibrancy around the GAA in general, but we didn't seem to be picking up on it at all, and in fact we were probably going backwards, if anything. And even in relation to our facilities, I suppose we missed the golden opportunity when maybe the country was awash with money to improve our facilities, while clubs all around us were doing it, and clubs even outside of the GAA, the competition in our locality, were all improving and were seen as a more attractive offering to the local community. And for us, I suppose this was creating a big problem, because what was coming down the line, I mentioned earlier about the social change that was happening due to the proximity of Edenderry to Dublin and the greater Dublin area. We experienced a huge rise in population, and it was towards the late, around 2008, 2009, we really began to look at this, and we found it of such value that we've continued to do it. So the figures in front of you there now bring you right up to date to the last census in 2011. And I suppose what it shows is between 1996 and 2011, a 71% increase in population. And whilst the red area on the map outlines our catchment area, the majority of that population was located within the small top corner of that in the urban area itself. So we had this influx of people, mostly migration from Dublin, but also, like a lot of other areas, a lot of non-nationals and new people to the community, certainly people who had no tradition in the GAA. And I suppose this was happening at a time when we were on the slide. And as we peered down into the figures and began to look at it, what really worried us was, when you look at the youngest age groups, it was what was going to come at us, or potentially come at us, or even more still, potentially what we were going to miss out on. And that there was this huge playing base. If you look at the 0 to 25 age group, there's about 1,500 boys and 1,500 girls within that cohort, which is essentially going to be our playing base over the next number of years. And also, if you look at the mid group from, we'll say, the 30 to 40 bracket, you can see the population pyramid with a bit of a belly on it, and effectively, I suppose, if you pardon the pun, with a bit of a belly on it, that's your childbearing age, effectively, as well. So, in fact, the large groups at the youngest age groups is actually going to grow and grow and grow. So there's going to be further population growth within the overall area. And as I already mentioned, about 13% of that was non-national. So that in itself was setting a particular challenge for us in how we're going to sell our club and put our club to the forefront in order to capitalise on this whole new community and to make the club grow and to make it sustainable into the future. So as I mentioned, we slid rapidly downwards through the mid-2000s until we found ourselves at rock bottom, and it was then we began to look at ourselves. And it was around 2008, 2009, as I said, we really got critical and started looking from within about what was actually happening, how our club was structured. And I suppose no more than any other club, our club was structured in a particular way because that's the way it had always been, and no one really addressed it. We just went from AGM to AGM and year to year and just continued to do the same thing. So when we looked at it in detail, I suppose in a lot of these conferences we always talk about positivity, and even when we're talking about teams, it's all about positivity. Well, I can assure you, when we sat in the room this time to talk about the club, this was all negative, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to really get an indication of, if you put yourself in the shoes of a new member of the community, how are we perceived, and how would we be perceived against maybe the other sports clubs and activities that we would have been in competition with. So at that time, our club was structured in such a way that we nearly had 3 clubs within one club. We had 3 very independent bodies operating under the banner of the GAA. We had the executive committee, or the main club as it was known, who operated a lot of the affairs of the club. We had a board and old committee, which had its own AGM and operated quite independently, had its own bank account. And then we had a ladies football club, which was, whilst there was ladies football in the 70s, it sort of died away. It came and they reformed in 2000. They were wearing the red jersey, they were using our facilities, but that's effectively it. That's where the links ended. So you had those 3 bodies competing all the time, and as I said, with our facilities deficit, there was just constant conflict. So effectively, when we began to look at this, we had to say to ourselves, look, our record is very poor in terms of governance. At the same time, we would have had a very poor record in terms of discipline on the field, with a lot of on-the-field problems which reflected very poorly on the club. So putting ourselves in the shoes of a new member of the community, I suppose we had to admit to ourselves that we would be perceived as being unsuccessful, disorganised, unresponsive to change and to the community. A certain element of being a closed shop as well. Even though I'm of the opinion that it was never the case, but if people was looking in, it was the same families from generation to generation, and there wasn't much new blood coming in. Elitist in the fact that we certainly would have had a win-at-all-costs attitude, and we really were only interested in looking after the better players. And I suppose we weren't relevant to anybody that had not a tradition in GAA or a tradition in Eden-Derry in particular. And I suppose that highlighted for us that effectively, between having no unity of purpose or a quality atmosphere, we couldn't really call ourselves a real club, or a club that people wanted to be part of. Our communications were poor. I've mentioned our facilities, and of course, if you can imagine, all of that was going wrong. Our finances certainly weren't in a healthy state, and we had nothing in place to cater for player development. As I say, win-at-all-costs attitude did prevail, and that's just the way we're set up. And we had difficulties with player retention. We were hemorrhaging players, as I said. So by taking the population data that we were now aware of, and the growth that was coming down the line, I mean, it was very clear that the structure we had was going to prevent the club from realising any sort of potential. So it was at that stage, and actually it was around the same time, at a national level, the strategic vision and action plan had been published, and Paul O'Kelly, who's been a member of our club, and he was shown earlier, Paul was involved in the preparation of that plan at a national level. So we had that link, and that formed a few discussions about what potentially we could do at a club level in terms of looking at all of our structures, looking at what we were doing, and where we wanted to be maybe in a 5-year time span. So we commenced the process of club planning in late 2009, and we put a bit of thought into it before we commenced, in that we wanted to get the structure right. We advertised it heavily that we were starting this process to try and get as many people and a wide amount of the community involved. And we commenced the process with holding a workshop where we invited everyone in. It was an open forum, and we got all the issues out on the table and went through them in detail. And from that evolved 6 focus groups under the 6 themes that are on the screen there. And they were developed out further, and effectively they formed a plan that was going to lead us forward from 2010 onwards. So we looked at the whole issue around the facilities, which was quite obvious that we had to improve that, and how we were going to go about it, and what kind of facilities did we want in the future. Our communications and PR and the whole social side of the club, we examined all of that, what we were doing, what we could be doing better, and what did we want to do, and what could we do to promote the club. The finance and fundraising, to put better structures in place in relation to our finance and how we managed our finances, and also structures around fundraising and how we were going to raise the money that was required to implement this plan. Coaching and games development, which I suppose that aspect of the plan is really going to inform the elements of that we want to convey here today. And I suppose because of our legacy, we wouldn't have paid much attention to what was going on in coaching and games. And I suppose what I can say today is we were quite a late comer to the whole coaching and games area. And when we began looking at this in detail, and people like Shane Flanagan, who's here with us today, was very helpful in that regard. Quite obviously, he was able to point out to us all of the national best practice and standards that were in place that we could just very easily be adopting that would make it an improvement immediately. Code of conduct we prepared as well, and that was in response of our poor discipline record on the field. But one of the biggest things we did was in terms of restructuring our club administration, and because that was the element that was going to make all of this hang together and to make sure that the wishes of those 100-odd people, plus the people involved in the focus groups that developed the plan and put the goals and objectives into it, that it all hinged on the club administration being sound in structure so that it would be fully implemented. And I think it was important that was done as part of the process, because it gave people confidence that all of these great ideas that formed the plan were going to be implemented. And part of it was that the executive was effectively reformed. The focus groups that had worked to develop the plan effectively became our subcommittees under headings of coaching and games, facilities, communications, finance. We brought in the ladies club and began the full process of integration, and the same with Board and Og. It all came under the one banner, and we all rowed in together to move forward, and that was a very positive start to the whole process. So effectively, the document that we produced was a roadmap, effectively, out over a 5-year period that was going to restructure the club and move us forward and to respond to the challenge that I identified in terms of being more relevant to our community. And as I say, for all of us involved, it was a big learning process, and one of the key areas for us was the whole coaching and games. As I say, the Board and Og committee had been operating quite independently, and I suppose their attitude was over the years, particularly maybe going back to our success in the 90s, it was just constantly looking back at that and how could we replicate that. So certainly the win at all cost attitude prevailed, and a lot of the best practice that would have been out there was ignored, I suppose, as it would have been seen maybe as a bit light touch or wasn't relevant to us. We didn't need to be doing that. So the whole part of coaching and games in our plan was set up as a driver for change. It was about changing the attitudes of our members, changing the attitudes of our coaches, and changing the attitudes of our community. And the key priorities that emanated from the planning process in relation to coaching and games, the first one is very obvious, that we would form a coaching and games subcommittee that would report to the executive on a monthly basis, with a club coaching officer chairing it. And they would set about effectively ensuring that all of the best practice was implemented in our club, and that it would define the playing ethos and the vision of how we wanted to move forward. And we immediately put that in place. The next one was to develop an active nursery programme. Whilst we would have had a management team over an under 8 group and an under 10 group and an under 12 group in hurling and football, we'd no essential nursery or introduction to the club. It was just come along, we'll train you as under 8s and we'll play games, and it was as simple as that. So we needed to put a bit of thought into our nursery programme, but it was a very key element of it because that was going to be our number one recruitment tool. And if we could get that right, that would be a fantastic start. And I'm going to develop or speak on that momentarily. A very basic one was to provide more games opportunities, and an important part of this was embracing the whole Go Games philosophy and ethos. And it was something certainly that our club, both if we weren't aware of it or people that were aware of it, were happy that we weren't aware of it, if you know what I mean. They were quite happy to ignore it. So we had a big job to push that forward and to ensure that the club was going to embrace that. Because again, when we looked at it, we could see that that was a tool that we could use to be more inclusive, to encourage people to get involved with the club, and probably more importantly, to stay involved with the club. We wanted to enhance our school liaison. Whilst we certainly had great ties to our schools and always did, we saw certainly opportunities to enhance that. Offaly County Board, through working with Alan Mulhall, the county games manager, had a scheme in place where they would send coaches into the school. And again, because of our structure, we weren't organised enough. We didn't have a local representative going in. Alan may have been sending in county players, but county players maybe from other clubs. So we got actively involved there, and that's where Keith McGuinness came in. Keith's one of our senior players, and he's represented Offaly as well. And it suited Keith to go into the schools. And over time, Keith has worked very hard over the last 3 years to improve that. And to the point now where the 5 primary schools, we've about 166 contact hours annually over an 18-week period. And that's giving every single child in primary school access to Gaelic games. So in fact, Keith is really our first salesperson. He's the guy that's reaching out to the full community, and he's able to pitch the rest of the club to everybody. So he's really the first point of contact for us, and he's done tremendous work on that in recent years, and we're very proud of that work. And then the last piece, which was critical as well, was that we would improve our standards of coach education, our awareness of it, and also that we would encourage our coaches to get educated. And going back to the club structure, an important element tied into the club structure was around the appointment of our coaches. I suppose up to that point, maybe like a lot of places, coaches were appointed basically maybe on who put their hand up, or I suppose things weren't going that well, you were struggling to find people. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to be able to handpick essentially the leaders of each group anyway, to ensure that the best practice would be implemented. And certainly parents and other volunteers were more than welcome to get involved, but at least we knew we had a couple of head people with each group that were going to stick to the plan and move things forward. So I mentioned that I wanted to touch on the nursery programme, because in addition to the work that Keith was doing in the schools, we identified the nursery programme as a real opportunity to open up the club and to advertise the club and to really make a change. And I suppose not everything was plain sailing. I mean, we launched the plan in 2010, and the setting up of the nursery would have been seen as a priority. But in fact, it didn't happen in the first year. It didn't happen in 2010, and we didn't actually get implemented until 2011. And the reason was, and it's like a lot of change is sometimes difficult. And we had people who had been involved for a long number of years with an under-8 group, who I suppose they thought were coming in to muscle in on what they'd been doing. Secondly, in their minds, they felt they were doing the right thing. They only wanted to deal with the best players. They were quite happy to have 20, 25 under-8s at their disposal. And I suppose nearly to the point where they felt it was their job to weed out the weaker players at that point. So you can imagine when you look at that, and if you look at the amount of potential players that we had in the area, and this was effectively going on, I mean, the club never really had a chance if we were to increase our playing numbers, if we begin weeding out the weak players before they even kick a ball. So we had a bit of a battle, would you believe, to get a nursery up and running, and it meant some people left the club annoyed that I suppose some people made it clear that they weren't happy with what they were doing. But that's the price we had to pay, and I suppose it made us even more determined to ensure that the club nursery would work. So we set about in 2011 about advertising it. We used Keith in the schools to promote it. We set about branding it, and I hope nobody from the marketing department of Croke Park is here, because we weren't too original with our branding, but we stole a little bit with the cool element of it. But we effectively called it Cool Reds, but it's something that has stuck, and it's now become very important to us in the club, and people feel a bit of ownership around it. But that first year was 2011. We pushed it very hard. We went about it in a manner that we got very organised. We made sure we had enough people there to cater for numbers that we were expecting to improve. And one of the key things we did, which is very simple when you think about it, the guys who had been dealing with the under-8 group, they only wanted the 8-year-olds, or maybe a couple of the strong 7-year-olds. As I said, when we parted company, one of the statements that was made was that they weren't in the business of changing nappies. They didn't want anyone below 7. But we wanted to open this up. We wanted to be more inclusive. The guys that have been looking after it for a variety of reasons, and one of them, I suppose, being the pressure that are on our facilities, they took this under-8 coaching away to one of the school pitches, which is probably one of the worst facilities that we have access to. There was no facilities, essentially, in terms of dressing rooms or shelter. It was just an open field. And that effectively was the first impression that people were seeing of our club. That was the first sight of the club they were getting. And if they were coming from Dublin or from elsewhere, I mean, it certainly wasn't going to inspire them with confidence that this was a club they wanted to be part of. So one of the first steps we did was we cleared the schedule on the pitch on a Saturday morning, and from now on the nursery would be held at our main grounds, which it seems quite simple, but it has made a huge difference for us. And we organised it that we had a number of drills. The children were rotating quite frequently. It was all revolved around fun. Go Games was a crucial part of it in terms of we saw it as a huge opportunity to spread the message of Go Games at an early stage as possible and inform the parents and the children of what was coming down the line. But we got a huge response, and in our first year, in terms of on the male side, we were taking about 120 boys. Now it's down there 5 to 8. We were taking 4-year-olds as well. We really didn't turn anyone away. The girls had a huge jump up from where there were only about 15 of them getting weekly coaching. Now, I suppose, as I mentioned, the coaches were probably only dealing with 7 and 8-year-olds. We had opened it up to 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. So that's why another reason for the big jump in numbers, but it's still quite a jump. They were up to 81. So when we looked at the potential catchment, we were up at penetration rates of 51% on the boys' side and 32% on the girls' side, which we were delighted with. I mean, it was fantastic. But not only were the kids having fun, were they developing their skills. It was the first time that we'd seen a real club atmosphere beginning to build. We were giving that positive first impression to all the parents. There was a tea and coffee station set up every morning as well, so the parents hung around rather than drop the kids off, and they sat in the stand and watched the game, and a great atmosphere prevailed. So it provided to be an excellent promotional tool for the club. And we've learned so much as we've gone through it. We're entering into our 4th year of it now. Last year we developed it a little bit further to try and spread the word a bit more. We took it out on tour effectively and went coaching on the green. So for particular Saturdays we spoke to a local residents associations of some of the newer housing estates and went down and actually held our Cool Reds nursery on the green. We did that twice last year and it was very successful. And there was the numbers dropped off because some of our regulars said they wouldn't attend and left it to the local residents. But we had over 100 on some of the greens, and we spread it out over 2 greens. But we were well able to cater as well because of the numbers of coaches. We got a huge response from the club, from existing players, past players, our teenage players. Everybody wanted to get involved. There was a buzz around the club and continues to be, and we have no problem in getting the help. We have regularly on Saturday mornings we'll have 20 plus coaches. So as a coaching games tool, it's very simple, it's very obvious, it's a nursery program, but it's the first impression, and the first impressions last. It's about giving these children a very positive experience in a fun environment, and to hope that they'll stay with our club, and that the earliest memories will be positive about eating their EGA club for themselves and for their parents. And as I said, it's also an opportunity for us to try and convey the new approach in terms of a more relaxed approach, fun environment, and moving into Go Games. And I suppose that's where my colleague Willie Ford is going to speak to you now about moving them to the next level, to the under 10 age group and his involvement with them and Go Games. So I'm going to hand over to Willie now, and he's going to take you through the next part.
Hello. I suppose just as a coach, it made my role very, very easy, and our role as a coach, it made it very easy for us when the kids were coming out of the nursery. Normally what was happening in the club before the nursery, as Colin said, at under 10 level, the kids would arrive up, you go up, you train. But what the kids were coming into, well, as a coach, the first thing we had numbers. We started off the year with 38 players at under 10 level. And that made it a lot more easier for us as coaches, that you weren't going around saying, oh, sure, we've only going to have 12 players, which was happening in the past. And just an experience I had myself, I happened to bring one of my nephews to a match, and the previous coaches were on the under 10s was there. And the way he separated his team was strong, weak. So the young lads were sitting in the dressing rooms and they were told, you're strong, you go there, you're weak, you go over there. And he left all the weak lads on the line, and all the strong lads played. And that's going on, and it's still going on in some clubs. And at that stage, like, how would you have numbers? But coming out of the nursery that we had, the kids, we 38 players. But not only that, their skill levels they were well able to pick the ball up. They were kicking well. Some of them weren't not as good as others, but there definitely was, their skill levels were better. But more importantly, they had an interest in GAA, which was huge for us. Like, to have 30 young lads down there wanting to come down because of the experience that they had in the nursery was huge. The coaches, they were familiar with all the coaches because the coaches had been involved with the under 10s this year, so they knew their faces. So they weren't coming into something new, because these coaches, any coach now has to help out in the nursery, any coach in the club has to help out in the nursery at least 3 or 4 Saturdays of the summer. The kids were familiar with the surroundings. They knew coming in where they were going. They knew what the GAA pitch was about. They were going up to the previous pitches, and it was just a field. But they were coming in, their behaviour. They knew that they had certain behaviour that had to be accepted in the club. And so you weren't shouting and roaring the kids. They just knew what to do. So they were just comfortable. And no matter what their ability was, the kids were totally comfortable starting this year. And because they knew they were going to be treated the same. So that was, as a coach coming out of nursery, well, it's good for the club, and it is brilliant for the whole PR of the club, and it's the way to go. But as you as an under 10 coach, what you're getting is much, much better as well from the starting point. I suppose our main aim, or my main aim as a coach, is twofold. One is obviously to improve the players and get them skill levels, and while doing that, enjoy it. But also to have the club in mind as well, is what we're trying to build as a club, is keeping these kids happy, keeping them coming to the club, because these are the future, no matter what their ability is. They have to have fun while we're training, enjoy it, and all kids treat it the same. That's so important to us down there, our under 10s. Like, if a young lad's good at tying his lace, we tell him he's good at tying his lace. Right? If he's good at kicking his left and his right, we tell him as well. But he's no better than the young lad that can tie his lace, and that's very, very important to us down there. And you can see it from the parents when they see some of them parents say, "Well, my Johnny's going to be no good," but Johnny's good at tying laces. And we'll tell him he's good at tying laces, and that is huge for the parents, right? And we're not. Some of these kids that are coming down mightn't have the best family life at the minute, but the parents know when they're coming down to our club, they're going to be treated right, and they're no different than anybody, and that's very, very important to us as coaches, and we make sure that's done. And if a coach is out of line and we feel he's not the right person for the job, well, then we won't be appointed, and we have done this numerous times. If you're going to be a coach now in the club, right, or a coach in our under 10s, you have to believe in the club ethos. You have to know what the club plan is, where the club's going. And most importantly, you must and you have to believe in the goal games 100%. If you don't believe in the goal games, it's hard to say you'll be told you're not wanted. And we've done it, and we'll do it again, and that's the mindset is so important, right? Because when we come to the games, and just say the game day, or the training sessions, we have to have consistency. We don't want fellas that are just coming for the matches because they want to see their Johnny win the match. You have to be there for the trainings the whole time. You only have these kids for 2 or 3 hours a week. So when they come down, they have to have fun, and we make sure they have fun, but they're still learning the skills. Our training sessions they're game based. We have sometimes, I know the lads were saying sometimes you have to have the match. We do game based drills the whole time, and sometimes the kids would say to us, "No, Willie, we don't want to play a match, we want to keep playing this." They're having that much fun. They don't want to play, sometimes they don't even want to play games, because we make it so different for them, and we join in ourselves, and we make them do different things, stupid things like mad stuff, but they really enjoy it. But they're learning the whole time. But it goes to the right saying, right, play a match. Sometimes the kids actually don't want to play a match, and they say, "No, we'll keep playing this." And so what we do is we swap them around their zones. So they're getting to play each other, everyone's getting to play each other. But we put them in small groups, but one thing we do, we always meet up 15, 20 minutes before the game, or the training sessions. And we say, right lads, what are we going to do? We never repeat the same session twice, never. Now, we might say, right lads, we weren't great at that last week, we'll do that with them this week, but we won't do the same drills where the boys come in to know what used to happen up in the old pitch was the boys be put across the line, kick with your left, kick with your right. That was it, to each other, and then go in for a game. We never repeat the same session, and it has been a huge success. Something else we've done with them, and going back to being competitive, we introduced a skills competition, right? And while the kids aren't getting much matches, they're not winning matches, they're not going home and say they're winning. By God, this was some success. What we did was, every week we gave them a skill. They had to practice with their left and right. We marked them, and we had a prize for the winner, the best, the most improved, the person who kicked the best with the right, kicked the best with the left. Every night, we'd bring them down the last few minutes of training sessions, and we'd all take them, and we'd let them, we'd mark them on their drills, and we'd tell them, you have to improve this. But what we did then is we brought them back at the end of the year, and we said, right, we're having all the drills together, and then we had it. We gave them all a prize. They all went home happy. But every week, at the end of the session, it was, what skill have we for next week? What skill have we for next week? And it was absolutely huge. I suppose things we did as well for consistency as well. We were all there every week, but what we did was, with great help from Alan Hall and Liam O'Reilly and the Offaly County Board, we brought in the county coaches as much as we could, and it was a huge success. Our local senior team and our adult coaches from their senior team and junior teams come down to if we ring them and ask them to come down, they come down and ask, if we give them a bit of notice, they come down and they'll take the session, just to see these kids that they're important, that they're the future. Like to have Peter Brady or Finn Cullen come down and take the under 10 teams, or Keith, and some of the fellas we have involved with Offaly, like we're talking about local people up there, or local sporting heroes. These lads, these kids, absolutely idolised these, and it was a huge success. So what happened was the training became such an important part. It was even more important than the match. The kids, every week we never had any less than 32 with training, because they just loved it. When it came to the match day, what we do is we make sure we don't talk about the result. Before they go out, we talk about the skills they learned that day or that week. And we say, lads, you did these skills, right? But one thing we try to do to them is say, lads, listen, concentrate on the skill, and when you haven't got the ball, you have to work hard. Forget that ethos into them, that you have to work hard for the ball, The kids would come off at half time, and we'd ask them, did you enjoy yourself? Are you enjoying it? That was the first thing. We'd tell them everything they're doing right, nothing they're doing wrong. They'd ask us what scores it is, you're doing well. Never tell them they're winning or losing, you're doing well. And I got to the stage now where the youngsters don't even ask. They know what's going to happen. We're going to tell them what they're doing well. When it came to full time, we tell every one of them, you did brilliant. We tell them about the skills, what you did right with the skills. Then we praise every single one of the players. We'd have it worked out we praise them. We could be telling them lies, but we're praising them to get them back down. And then we tell them again about the training next week, and it'll all go back to the training. Every single match we put a report in the paper. So them kids see their name in the paper. It's on Facebook, it's on the website, and we do it every single time. And these kids, they just love to see this and just to be part of it. And I suppose from that's all part of it. And they're all learning every time. We're not just down there playing with them. They're learning skills. If people, like, we go to match days some days, and it has come to us, people have come over and said to us, we play 13 aside. This has happened. And I says, well, you can play among yourselves, because we're going back into Edenderry. We've been asked to play full football, right? And it's important that you stand up to these coaches that are saying they want to do these things. Say, no, we're not doing it, because people will bend the rules, right? And people try to bend the rules with us, and that's why you have to be strong with them. And I have been strong with them. Like, there is teams within Offaly that you hear them talking, we've the best team in Offaly, under 10. Right? And you can hear them shouting and roaring at the kids at under 10, and it's just crazy. But we stay well away from that. But we are encouraging them. Their skill levels are improving. And that's from the under 10's point of view. But from the club, how does the club benefit? Well, the clubs benefit because the families of these kids. We've 42 kids. That's 84 families that are connected to these kids from the town. Right? So we're hitting 84 families in the town, and they're seeing their kids wear the red jersey, no matter what their ability is, right? And their names on the paper, and everyone played brilliant every week. And the grandparents are seeing it, the mothers are seeing it, their brothers, their sisters, their aunties are seeing it. And what we're doing is we're putting a feel-good factor around the club. So backed up by the nursery programme, backed up by our under-10s programme and under-12s, because we do this with other groups as well, is we're putting a feel-good factor around the town, and these people are becoming club supporters. So we have a thing called the March of the Reds, and it's fundraising day. And the two biggest supporters of the March of the Reds within the club is the Cool Reds and the under-10s, because they've come out of the Cool Reds. So what we're doing is we're building the future. We're building kids and families that are going to support the club. So it's making it easier for us. There's a feel-good factor around the town, and we're building the profile of the club around the town. Not just by us coaching the kids, but we're coaching the kids right in a way that people are talking about us in the right way, and which is going to build the club. But I suppose when you started out, we said, what way do we start out this year? Our last training session this year, we 38 kids at it. We started out with a panel of 36, we finished out with a panel of 42. That's 6 extra kids at the end of the year. So to me, that's a success. And that's what we're doing. And while we're training the kids to create footballers, to create a club, right? But we're creating a club by doing it right. Not just, but while the Go Games is all about creating the player and the skill levels, but you can also create your club through it as well. And that's our ethos within our club. I'll hand you back to Colin. Colin's going to finish up there.
Thanks, Willie. I just want to finish up. We've actually probably touched on a lot of them, but maybe just a recap on some of the challenges that we encountered through this process and ultimately the benefits that have accrued as well. As we've mentioned, breaking down that attitude of keep the best and neglect the rest, it can be challenging at times, and we found that there was resistance from existing personnel in the club. And you do your best, and we've been doing it over the last couple of years of making that cell, promoting it, but there will come a time when some individuals just you can't see eye to eye, and some people have walked away, and thankfully some of them have come back, and that's great, but some have stayed away, and that's the cost. But we're prepared to do that because we feel if we're doing the right thing, the evidence is there to back it up, and we're happy to keep moving forward in that way. Willie touched on it in terms of the inconsistency in implementation of Go Games, and I know Pat mentioned it earlier in his presentation. I think there has been great strides made in recent years in terms of compliance, and more people are buying in. But we've still encountered some instances where clubs aren't behind it. And I suppose all we seek from our coaches when they encounter that is a bit of leadership, as Willie said, that not to get involved in it, to not take part, and promote Go Games at all times. And whether that takes the form of competitive invitational tournaments, or we had an instance this year with the community games format. I think it's at under 9.5 or under 10. But the way we looked at that was it was in complete conflict with everything we were doing, and it's not something we wanted to be part of. And traditionally we would have been, and again that created a difficulty for some people in our club and in our community. But we had to make our case, and we made it publicly. It brought the community games group down upon us, but again we stood firm on it because we couldn't possibly be contradicting ourselves in what competitions we were entering. We were going to stay true to the Go Games philosophy. Other clubs seeking to bend the rules, as mentioned, we're looking for leadership from our coaches, and be prepared possibly to lose some volunteers that will stick to the traditional mindset. Parents, I think broadly, 99% of them are fully behind it because all of their children are involved. But I think it's nearly turned full circle, where previously the parents of the stronger children were always the happiest. They're now probably not so happy. They feel that their Johnny's been held back through the Go Games model. So there's another whole cell to them to explain to them that you're not holding their child back, that in fact they're probably being developed even more as a player. So we've encountered some of that as well, and that's. But again, we just keep true to the principles and keep selling the message, because ultimately we're just implementing best practice in order to create a real club. The benefits. I mean, what we're setting out to do here is create a sustainable membership, and even to prevent that fluctuation in fortunes for the club, to try and get it on a steady, firm footing, and that would be maintained into the future. We need the big base of membership. As I say, we have the deficit in facilities, and we see by growing the membership, we'd be able to invest in our facilities into the future. We want to give that positive experience and to be selling the GAA in the proper manner to all players and families, that they know there's fairness and equity involved, that they're all going to be involved and involved in an equal manner, and they'll get fair play and respect. The PR for the club and the GAA in general continues. We're improving our own coaching standards, which, you know, may end up in some success down the line, and if it does, we'll enjoy it. But across the board, there's more recognition within the club in terms of coach education, and even a desire for knowledge and a want among our coaches to get up to the required standard. And in fact, as we go into 2014, we'll actually be in a very strong position that we'll have a level 1 coach with every team across the club. And again, that was a goal of our 5-year plan, and we're delighted to be able to achieve that. And overall, that, you know, all of these children, whether it be football, ladies football or hurling, they're improving their skills in a fun environment, and it's a place where the kids recognise and a place where the kids want to be. And as you might have seen from some of the earlier slides, we're obsessed with our numbers now, and you know, we were constantly monitoring it, and we have the evidence that what we're doing is certainly bringing player retention and a happier player. I suppose the next couple of years we'll see how it evolves and what comes down the line. But we're certainly very, very satisfied and delighted with the progress to date. And we feel we're measuring our success on numbers and numbers playing rather than titles. And Willie touched on it in terms of our fundraising. In our first year, the nursery, and I think this is another reason for its success, was that we had no charge for that nursery. We didn't charge any membership. The club paid any fees in relation to insurance. Because the numbers were so large, it involved quite an outlay for the club. So the subsequent years we decided to implement a charge, and the numbers did dip slightly. So we've now made a decision that we're actually going to go back to the free model at our nursery level, and that's going to continue, because you get it back in spades anyway. When we held all the fundraising, the parents and the children, I suppose particularly the parents, were realising how well their children were being looked after. When we did have the fundraising events, I mean, they gave us money hand over fist. So you make it back anyway. So it was a bit of, we were speculating to accumulate, and it paid off. And ultimately, we're just trying to stick to the whole principle that we want to maximise participation in Gaelic games in our growing community, and striving for lifelong participation for all, whether that be on the field or off the field, because certainly as we see growing, there's going to be plenty of roles for these young members off the field as well. And we believe if they're getting a positive experience now, that they'll stick with the club in some form, and they'll use whatever skills they develop over their lifetime and give it back to the club. So effectively, that's all we have for you today. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm not sure how we're doing on time or going to take any questions, but thanks very much.